I feel so confident in this jacket, so I think it's going to be a good one. We're in chapter 5. We've been preaching through the book of Ephesians. I don't usually do this kind of expository preaching, they call it, where you go through like kind of verse by verse thing. And so we're going to be hitting some verses today that, and hopefully I'll be able to bring some light to it, that aren't people's favorite passages to read or go through. So why don't you go and start at 5, Michelle? We'll go down to, we'll go to 20. We'll go right down there. I can't see it, so.
Okay. Be imitators of God, therefore, as dearly loved children, and live a life of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. But among you, there must not be even a hint of sexual immorality or of any kind of impurity or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Nor should there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. For of this you can be sure, no immoral, impure, or greedy person, such a man is an idolater, has an inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of such things God's wrath comes out on those who are disobedient. Therefore, do not be partners with them. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Love as children of light, for the fruit of the light comes in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, and find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, for it is light that makes everything visible. That is why it is said, "Wake up, O sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you." Be very careful then how you live.
Not as unwise, but wise, making the most of every opportunity.
Thank you.
It's torn out of my Bible there.
Because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. Speak to one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Sing and make music in your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Okay, fun passage, right? Everybody likes that. Here's the thing. You know, you read something like that, or you hear that's going to be preached on, you think right away, oh, here it comes. Here comes the judgmental preaching, right? Sex, drugs, rock and roll, bad stuff, don't do that. And there are some people going, I hate these kind of messages, right? Some people are like that. Other people are like, finally, yeah, judgment, sex, drug, rock and roll, yeah, I love this. We need to stop that stuff, right? And there are others that are maybe sitting there thinking, yeah, I know, I get it. It'll make me feel even worse, right? And so we all have these different feelings about passages like this. But I think the key to this, for me at least, is remember a couple things. One is that first and foremost, the way I see it is this is a love letter. It's a love letter. And so it's everything in there, if you read it in its proper context, and this is big, this is what's really big right now. If you let this message and these words speak to you, not to somebody sitting next to you, not to somebody who's not here. How many times have you ever thought that, sitting in a seat thinking, man, I wish so-and-so was here to hear this? Anybody? Come on, be honest. Right. And so the biggest thing today is to sit and let this kind of wash over you. I always use the same illustration. I have a friend, his name's John Slater. He owns a funeral home. And I always talk about John. John lives his life. He stays in his lane, right? And John is a certain way. No matter what context you see him in, he's within his lane. And he doesn't venture outside of that. And if you think about driving down the road and you have a line on this side of the road and a double line in the middle or whatever, those lines, those barriers are there for what? For your protection, right? Stay within those. And if you would look at Scripture like that this is a love letter from God to us. And the stuff that we read is there for me, so that I live the kind of life that God desires me to live. John 10:10. Jesus said, I've come that you might have life in its most abundant form. So he desires us to have abundance in life. Now, it's not talking about possessions, because we all know that abundance of possessions doesn't necessarily equate to happiness and joy. Isn't that right? He's talking about the things that really bring it. Peace, contentment, mercy and grace, those things in our life, an abundance of those types of things. So when you look at a passage like this and you realize and you think, well, this is there for me. Now, I may not struggle with some things I might struggle with. They're there to help me so that I can live the kind of life that God desires me to live. I was looking through different things online. I found this Time magazine, actually it was a whole Time magazine issue. It was called The Science of Addiction. I think I have it. You ever find that? There it is right there. The Science of Addiction. So let me just read to you in there what the definition of addiction is. Michelle, would you give me some water, please? It's a different cup. Here's their definition. Chronic relapsing behavior of negative consequences. The overwhelming urge to continue something you know is bad for you. We've all done that, haven't we? We've all lived that. We've all experienced that in life. Paul even says it. In a passage of scripture, Paul says, the things I know I shouldn't do. And this is Paul, the Apostle Paul, who wrote the majority of the New Testament. So we're in good company. Paul said, why is it the things I know I shouldn't do, I do? And the things I know that I should do, I don't do. Like, why is that? And we all have that same nagging feeling in us. Why is it that I know this thing is bad for me, yet I continue to do that? Let me read it again for you. Thanks, Michelle. A chronic relapsing behavior of negative consequences. The overwhelming urge to continue something you know is bad. We've all experienced these kind of things. We've all experienced millions of dollars a year are lost to drugs and alcohol for businesses, right? Anybody that's in business knows employees don't show up, and trouble and drugs and alcohol. We know that. Right now, 1 out of 8 Americans struggle with drugs or alcohol. Another problem is gambling. How many watch TV and you're watching sports and every single commercial comes up, it's about betting, it's about betting, it's about betting, it's about betting. And so and at the end of all of it, I just have to laugh every time I hear it, because they encourage you to do all this gambling and everything. At the end, what do they say? If you have a gambling problem, call this number, right? So they're encouraging you to do this, realizing that it's addictive behavior. There's sex addiction. It's second only to drugs and alcohol. Listen to this. This is the Mayo Clinic now. Mayo Clinic. This isn't some pastor preaching. This is the famous Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic released a study that said pornography is now well established. We all know that, and is a fact. It's a vehicle for sexual addiction. Pornography. So we have the sex, gambling, booze. Preach it, brother. Some people want to hear that, right? Hang on, because there are other addictions, aren't there? What about this? What about a shopping addiction? Shopping addiction. You ever go to the store for milk? Just milk. Where do they put the milk? Like all the way in the back. Like, I got to walk through everything. And as I'm walking through, I'm going, oh yeah, I need that, I need that, I need that, I need that. That's not addiction, actually. That's just normal shopping, But how about a food addiction? People get addicted to food. One study said this: food can be even more addictive than drugs. So in this article, this is crazy, but it said this, that Oreo cookies. How many like Oreos? You ever see Kramer say, you dunk them in, you twist it apart. Let's scrape that off right the inside of there. It said that Oreos light up the dopamine receptors in your brain more than cocaine. Oreos. Wow, that was amazing. How about this? How about anger addiction? Anger addiction. This was an article from Psychology Today. Anger can give the same dopamine rushes as gambling and cocaine, and I guess as Oreos too. Now, you've probably experienced that before. Sometimes it feels good to get really, really angry, doesn't it? Because it's releasing this dopamine in your brain. Let's talk about one that I'm sure no one here has an addiction to, but anybody know what it is? It's in your pocket right now, probably. Hopefully it's on vibrate, right? Phone addiction. Phone addiction. Do you ever catch yourself just nothing happened? It didn't ring or anything. Didn't buzz, didn't ring or anything. Picking up and looking at it. Anybody? Yeah, just pick. I find myself driving in a car. All of a sudden I pick up my phone and going, why am I looking at the phone? Like, why am I looking at it? It didn't ring. It didn't do anything. It didn't ding. It didn't buzz. Did nothing. I pick up and look at it while I'm driving. We need not be doing that. Listen to this. This was a Stanford researcher, Anna Lembrecht. She said this: just about all of us have a digital drug of choice, and it probably involves using a smartphone, the equivalent of the hypodermic needle for the wired generation. It's just amazing how it has taken over our lives. And so if you think about all these things, all these potential issues in our life, and this isn't even an exhaustive list. You could probably think of other things. And so the Apostle Paul, led by the Spirit, is trying to say, now, mind you here, who's he writing to? We talked about this last week. Who's Paul writing to? He's writing to followers of Jesus. He's not writing to people who aren't. He's not writing to people who are out there just doing their things. Like they're going to do what they do. But he's saying this, just like in the Old Testament for the Israelites. God was saying, I want you to be different. I want you to be set apart. Why? Because you represent me. I want the world to see there's a different way to live. And so this is what Paul was saying here. He's saying, I want you to live this way. I want you to stand out. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those things here. What are they? And then what do we do about them? How do we overcome them? So in here, he talks about some of the things we talked about in that article. 4 common self-destructive patterns. So if you have notes, you want to do that, you can write these in there. The first one is this. The first one is abusing sex. Abusing sex. Now, what I find it fascinating is, a lot of people might hammer on this real hard. Let me just be clear. Sex is a gift. It's a gift from God to be enjoyed, right? But in the right context. Outside of that context, it can be very, very destructive. So he says this, but among you, there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality. Now, that's 2 words in English. In the Greek, it's 1 word, porneia. Porneia. And that's where we get our word porn, right? We get our word porn from porneia. He said, and any kind of impurity. So keep in mind that this is a gift, right? But like all gifts, like anything in life, anything that's good can be misused and abused. Isn't that true? All things. Food, we need food to sustain us. We're not going to talk about that in this area, right? But we need that to sustain us. But it can be abused. It can be abused. So he only, a half a sentence does he stay on this. And then he moves to the second thing about abusing stuff. About abusing stuff. He said, or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Pleonexia is this word that's used for greed. And it's just this. It's a continual lust for more. I think I talked last week about a friend of mine I asked him the question, and this is what Rockefeller was asked the same question. How much is enough? And I asked my friend this, how will you know when enough is enough? How will you know? And what Rockefeller's answer was this, how much is enough? Guess what Rockefeller's answer was? Like I said last week, just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. See, if you are chasing these things, a continual lust for more, if you're chasing these things to fill that place in your life of peace, of joy, of contentment, if I could just attain this, then I'll be secure, then I'll be at peace, then I won't have to worry, right? If I could just get to this place. And then what happens, the inevitable happens, is you get to that place, no matter what that place is. It doesn't matter. It's not about having millions and getting to billions. It's not about having hundreds of thousands getting to a million. It's not about even having 50,000 and getting to 100. That's irrelevant. The point is this. The point is that you're looking for things like that, looking for stuff in your life to meet something that it wasn't meant to meet. God was meant to meet those things in our life and the way that we live our life. And so how much is enough? Rockefeller's answer, of course, was, well, just a little bit more. The next thing he talks about in Scripture is abusing speech. Abusing speech. He says this, nor should there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. Now, obscenity, of course, is foul language, is swearing, is cussing, obscenity. Foolish talk, this word, I was just looking this up this morning because I was in there and I was thinking about this word. It's morologia. Logia, of course, is the word, Greek word for word or speech. Moro is where we get our word moron, right? Moron talk is what it's talking about here. Talking like a moron. And then I looked up coarse joking, and the thing about coarse joking was this: it wasn't talking about a incident, but it was talking about a speech where it's peppered with that. It's peppered with obscenities. You know what I mean by peppered, right? You have an egg on your plate and you put pepper. You see those speckles everywhere, don't you? Right? And so that's what it's talking about, is speech that's peppered with obscenities. It's peppered with, so coarse joking sounds like I tell a joke. That's not what this is talking about. It's talking about a way in which you're habitually speaking. The fourth thing that he mentions here, again, there's more, is abusing substance. Abusing substance. It says this: don't get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. Now, when I was younger, that was a big thing. See, don't get drunk on wine. You shouldn't be drinking alcohol and stuff like that. This is not what this is talking about. I mean, in a sense, what it's talking about is this: it's talking about trying to get something, like in all this, trying to get something that you desire, that God, it's meant for God to fulfill in your life, getting it somewhere else. Do you follow me? Right? And so this other article I was reading in Psychology Today, they were talking about like addictive behavior and so forth, and this was really fascinating to me. And we think of like drugs and alcohol and those things of being addictive substances. That's what you're addicted to. But what they discovered is more and more is it's not that. It's other things in your life, being isolated, being withdrawn, those kind of things that lead to the use of these things, and that creates the abuse, getting addicted to something. So it's not that those things are not chemically addictive, but it's more the fact of lifestyle. And so with that in mind, Paul talks about the things that how we need to live to help us avoid these destructive behaviors. Let's face it, we all have them, don't we? Like if we haven't had them in our life, which I'm sure, no matter what age you are, you've had those. You've had destructive behaviors, things that you know are not beneficial for you. They're not helping you. And you can't, for some reason or another, you can't seem to get by those, to get over those. So what Paul does here, Paul kind of through here, as he's going through, he talks about some different things that will help us, if we implement them in our life, to overcome these self-destructive behaviors. I'm so glad that clock isn't working back there on that screen. Okay, let's talk about these four things. Is there a clock up there? No.
10 after 11.
Is it right now? All right, everybody can leave, but Steve needs to stay here because he needs this more than anybody. The first thing is this. So he starts out in there. Michelle read it. The first thing is living in imitation to God. Now let me talk about something that an idea that was first brought by Rene Girard. He's since passed away. But he talked about this idea of mimetic desire. Mimetic desire. Talked about it before in here. And that's this idea that we get our desires from one another. Those we hold in esteem, those we hold in, we look up to, we want to be like them. And advertisers know this better than anybody. That's why they put Matthew McConaughey driving a Lincoln. That's why Steve drives a Lincoln. He idolizes Matthew McConaughey. He loves his hair and he loves his car. That's what he loves. And so, but we weren't meant to try to imitate one another, right? Because what that does, that creates rivalry, especially when the resources that we're after are limited. I know when I was in high school, every girlfriend I had, Jeff wanted that girl because, he looked up to me and he wanted that. Maybe that's not true. Okay, maybe not. But we were meant to imitate God. We're meant to imitate him. We're meant to be like, we're created in his image, the Bible says. So we're meant to try to imitate him. So what are some things, a couple things that we can look at? First is this, develop love as a lifestyle. Love as a lifestyle. It said this, just as God loved us, we are called to love others selflessly, transcending destructive behaviors, selfishness, and hatred. So loving others, what's the first thing that God did for us? He forgave. So part of that lifestyle, part of living that, a life of love, or a love lifestyle, is forgiveness, is kindness to other people. And see, so keep in mind now, these are things that Paul is saying, if you'll implement these in your life, these are the kinds of things, the kind of ways to live, they're going to help you with destructive behaviors. That makes sense? Okay? So you might not deal with stuff I talked about in there, but we all know what destructive behavior is. So now what Paul is saying is, these are the things in your life as you go down this road and you live this way. It's going to help you in those areas. And so choosing to forgive rather than holding a grudge. And there are many examples that we can use, right? The second thing is this, under imitating God, would be this, if that Jesus came and gave himself, right, as an example for us, to the point of going to a cross and dying. This idea of sacrificial living. So we're to emulate that. We're to emulate that. Just like you do as a parent. You sacrifice as a parent for your children. And so this way of living, and the Bible talks so much about this, right? Consider others before you consider yourself. Put others first. Now, it's not saying don't take care of yourself. Don't go down that road. That's not right? Because we need to be able to love ourselves and to know ourselves. But it's this idea of talking about greed and wanting everything for you. No, it's living a life in service to others. Jesus even said this of himself. He said he didn't come to be served. If anybody should have been served in this world, it's him. He said he didn't come to be served. He came to serve. He came to serve. So sacrificial living. So what is that? What does that mean, sacrificial living? It can be as simple as volunteering. We talked about the way the body works last week and the weeks before, about how the body is the representation of Christ and how it's all of us are called, right? Remember we talked about that? Every one of us are called. Every one of us is gifted in some way. And we're to use that in service to who? Well, you could say to God, but also in service to each other. So if we all in here have different gifts and we're using those gifts, right? And so the gifts that I have, I'm using, and I'm serving the body. I'm serving you. And then that's one gift that I'm serving everybody. But now everybody has a gift that I'm being served with. You follow me? So we live a life of service, of sacrifice, of giving, the way Jesus did. And again, he's talking about these are the things that when you live this way, you will, how do I want to put it? You won't have to try to figure out how to break self-destructive behaviors. Do you follow me? Because what you're doing is you're replacing it with other things. You're replacing it. And so last week I think it was last week, can't remember now, so many, we talked about this idea of old self and new self, about putting on and taking off that old self. And so we put those things away and we put on this new clothing. So love is a lifestyle, sacrificial living. The second thing is this: avoid the works of darkness. Now, I'll tell you, I could have probably preached 3-4 messages just on this alone right here, especially in our world today that we're living in, right? Where it's so hard to tell what's true out there and what's not. Isn't that true? Right? We just don't know anymore. And so here's some counsel from Paul, inspired by the Spirit for us. And that's this: try to maintain purity and integrity in your relationships. Not just your spousal relationship, but all your relationships. Purity and integrity in relationships. He says this: flee from sexual immorality and impurity, preserving the sanctity of relationships. Relationships. I think this is so important. Fidelity in marriage, but not just that. It's even just in all relationships. There needs to be a fidelity there, a trust. How many know this? How many know that in any relationship, when trust is broken, once it's broken, boy, it takes a long time to build that back, doesn't it? It takes a long time. Maybe you've experienced it your own self. Maybe you broke the trust, and you desperately want somebody to trust you again. But it's just not something that it can be just given just willy-nilly. It's something that has to be developed. And so once you break it, it's tough to get it back. And so what Paul is saying here is live a life where you don't have to worry about that. Live a life of purity. Live a life of integrity in your relationships. Listen, here's the thing that you need to do. So avoid content, avoid relationships that may, and I know, listen, I was in Bible school, and I know that they would say, this is sin, so don't do this because it leads to that. Don't do this because it leads to that, right? You follow me? That's not good. This is what's wrong. But there is something about putting yourself in situations where temptation will get the best of you. Isn't that right? Right? Don't go to those places. I remember a friend of mine, and you all know him. He was, into drugs and selling drug stuff his whole life. And when he kind of got rid of all that and changed his life and changed it around, one of the first things someone told him was, listen, that phone you have, get rid of it. Get rid of all those contacts you have in that phone. You know the places you used to go? Don't go to those places anymore. Why? Because that's the putting off the old self. Because those are the places where what? Someone would come, hey, he would tell me, so he'd see somebody. He was with this is a great story, I got to tell the story. He was with a pastor friend of his. He had just kind of got away from all that stuff. He was with a pastor friend. They were playing racquetball. Went to a convenience store. When he went in there, he saw somebody that he used to know that he's the adult drugs. And he come up there, and the pastor's standing right next to him. And he walks up and he says, hey, you Holden? I guess that means you have drugs. You Holden? He's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about, because the pastor's right there, Walked outside. He knew. But he had to stay away from those types of things, those types of areas. Why? Because they're leading him back down that road. So flee from those things, he's saying. Run from those things. And if there are things that are explicit material, things that have harmful content in them, stay away from those things. The second point would be this: exposing darkness with light. How many know we need this in our government right now? Isn't that true? We need this in our government. Everything seems to be clandestine, things that aren't meant to be hidden from us, right? And expose darkness with light. Shine the light of truth and righteousness in a world filled with deceit and darkness. Listen, we need to promote honesty. We need to promote transparency in all of our dealings, in our professional business dealings, to the best of our ability. Promote those things in our personal life. Promote that, because here's the thing. When Michelle and I first started the church, one of the things that we had heard or talked about is they would say pastors need to stay separate from their congregation. Okay, hear me out here. Separate from their congregation. And the reason they said is because the congregation needs to see you as holy or you follow me, or righteous, someone to follow, right? And I get that to a point, but that should be all of us living that life, because we all have somebody looking at us, don't we? Right? Like Dennis Rodman famously said, I'm no one's role model. Well, that's not his choice, is it? If somebody chooses him, he's not saying, I want to be your role model. Somebody picks him. He said, I can live however I want because I'm nobody's role model. We're all somebody's looking to us. And so I get to that point, I get that. But here's the problem. The problem is that when you start to live, when you start to feel like you have to be a certain way, and then you know that you're not meeting up to even the things you're preaching about, then you begin to do what? You begin to kind of hide those things. Once you start to hide, now it's a never-ending road. And here's the thing. They say, people put you on a pedestal. I used to say, don't put me on a pedestal, because I will get knocked off. Eventually, I will get knocked off. Why? Because I'm a human being. I'm a human being. The same with you. You'll have your faults and your failures. And so we tried from the very beginning to be upfront. How many times if you've been here for any length of time, you know that sometimes in the morning, Sunday morning, for whatever reason, it seems like that was always a difficult time for Michelle and I in our marriage. I don't know why. I guess because I'm getting ready. She's getting ready to participate in music and worship, and I'm preaching, and we would have a fight. And sometimes I would come and I would apologize to her right here in front of everybody. Let you know we are normal, right? We struggle with things too. And so I want to try to lead by example and say, we do have problems, but you know what? We take care of it. We take care of it. So Michelle, you can apologize to me later. I know it's something probably you can. But shine the light of truth and righteousness in this world filled with deceit and darkness. So let's try to do that in your life, in your personal day, the best you can. Now, that's not to say that you go out there and tell everybody all your sins and all your failures and all your baggage. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. But don't hide. Don't put on a mask to pretend that you're something you're not. Last week I talked about the Brene Brown video that I've showed here in church before, The Power of Vulnerability. You should all watch it. It is that good. The power of vulnerability, of being able to live a life open. Listen, the thing about that is there's safety in that. The minute you start hiding, you have to continue to start hiding. You start living in the shadows. There's been, you can just think of tons of movies about that. Living in the shadows, living in that dark space. And the Bible tells us, no, that's not where we're to live. We're to live, live in the light. Third thing is this, about wise living and making the most of time he's talking about. And so one of the things is discerning God's will. And this isn't some talking about some ethereal thing and how do I do that? How do I talk to God and hear voices? No, read his word. Seek God's wisdom in all directions to avoid the mindless traps of conformity. Right? The world's doing one thing. And you go, just because everybody's doing it must be the right thing. No, discern God's will. Read his word. What are the good ways to live? What are the ways that I should live rather than just mindless conformity? And so do this. Do something it's so simple, friends. Is just pray to God and ask him for wisdom. I for the time my boys were young, I told them, I said, there are bad decisions, there are good decisions, and there are great decisions. So you don't want any of those. What you want is a wise decision, And so I would tell them all the time, use 3 criteria. Think about, based on my past experiences in my life. Now, when you're young, you don't have a lot of past experience. When you're older, you have a lot of those past experiences. So, based on past experiences, what's the wisest thing for me to do in this situation? Right? Think about your spouse. Think about something that that a button to push. Right? Based on my past experiences, what's the wisest thing for me to do? Sometimes keep my mouth shut. Keep my mouth shut. Don't say that thing because I know where it's going to lead. Based on my current circumstances, what's the wisest thing to do? Right? So you go every year or something with your buddies to, wherever, Mardi Gras or something like that, right? Every year you guys do that together. And then you get married. And then, then that day comes, maybe you live in different parts of the country, where that weekend comes up, hey, going to Mardi Gras? Based on my current circumstances, that may not be the wisest thing for me to do. Isn't that true? And the third thing, especially for my boys that I try to tell them, we all, especially young, we have future hopes and dreams. Based on your future hopes and dreams, what's the wisest thing to do? Not the best thing, not a good thing. What's the wisest thing for me to do? And so pray and ask God for wisdom. But not only that, do this. Seek counsel. Hopefully you have people around you who are trusted friends. Go and talk to them. Ask them, what do you think about this? And then listen to their counsel. Wise living. And the next thing is time management. A lot of you are very, very good at this. Utilize your time wisely. Understanding this, that every moment is an opportunity. Every moment is an opportunity for good. How many remember Stephen Covey, right? The Habits of Highly Successful People. He has that remember that chart? It draws it across like this. As there's important, non-important, urgent, and non-urgent, right? And then you have the non-important and non-urgent stuff down here, and you have the important stuff but not urgent, and these are the zones 3 and 4. And somehow we get caught up in those things and wasting time in those things. And then you have the urgent but not really important but not really urgent, right? And so think about important things are this. Important things are the long-term things in your life, aren't they? Like your spiritual development, long-term. Your financial security. That's a long-term thing. Those are important but not urgent. It's not urgent, like, I have to get all my spirituality like today. I need that today. That's urgent. No, it's a long-term thing. And then you have the urgent and the important. And so spend your time in those quadrants, the 1 and 2 quadrants, right? Learn how to manage your time well. And if you spend a good bit of time in 2, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, about doing the important, it kind of takes care of. You have less urgent things. The trouble is we end up spending a lot of time down in quadrant 3, don't we? The urgent. It's urgent. I need to get it done. But it's not important. But we waste time down there. You ask anybody in business, Jeff, I know he knows these things, even Steve, right? Anybody in business knows these things. And there are certain areas, like in business, where maybe you spend your time in 1, and 2, you delegate. You delegate to somebody else. It needs to get done, but maybe not by you. Do you follow me? So it's just wise use of time. 4 is this. And this is why I want you guys to come up and do that last song. What time is it? 12. What time you got? What's that? 10:58. Is it really? Come on, Michelle. Good, you get the band? Yeah. Thank you for your honesty. Be filled with the Spirit and worship. So Spirit-filled living. Allow the Spirit to fill you and guide you. And this alone helps replace destructive behavior with God's. So the Bible talks in Galatians about the fruit of the Spirit. Listen, you should get these in your head. Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These are the things that we develop in our life and live a Spirit-filled life. And the last thing is this. This is so important. That's why I want them to sing this song. By the way, Mike, I hope your voice, you did it. It's a remarkable job. It was really, really, really great. I mean, she's called, and she's gifted. How many know she's gifted? She's gifted, and she's serving. So worshipful living, express gratitude. Express gratitude. Right? Think of things in your life on a daily basis, on a month, that you can be grateful for. I'm so grateful for this jacket today. You too, Jeff? Yeah, I'm so grateful. And foster a heart of When we use worship, that's a strange word for us. But it's just attitude. I hate phrases like this, but I'm going to use it anyway. To continue to develop an attitude of gratitude. Be thankful for the things in your life. Don't always be looking for the next thing that's gonna meet your needs, or learn to live in the moment with the joy of what you have now, not of what you can get in the future. Worshipful living. Now I want you to just spend, the words will be up there. I don't know how you like to do this, but I want you just to, if you want to stand, that's fine, or whatever. But I want us to think about this message, and think about this, even this last point right here, because I think this alone can really go a long way in changing how we live at a moment by moment, day to day basis, of thinking bigger, larger, grander than just ourselves. Would help me, Steve, get the table in the chair.